Hello and welcome back to the Frugal Granny channel. I'm Frugal Granny, my name is Ali. I'm a 64-and-a-half-year-old semi-retiree, and I started this channel to document my run up to retirement from my office job, which has now happened, and how I cope once I have passed that milestone and I no longer have that income coming in. If you're new here, you're very welcome. And if you're a returning viewer, it's lovely to see you. Today is going to be a little bit of a mash-up, to be honest with you. I had hoped to do quite an in-depth talk on my experience with tax returns and, record keeping, and we will touch on that a bit. But before we do that, I just want to follow up on a couple of things that I mentioned in the coffee and catch up. Thank you very much to everyone in the comments who pointed out that I had got my understanding of the guarantee period for annuities wrong, and I'm very, very grateful to all of you that pointed that out, because I had got it wrong. And I think this really does show the importance of not believing everything you see on the internet or read in the media. You know, go away and check it for yourself. Don't take anything I say as gospel truth. You always must go and check what you hear against other sources to see that they're right. But anyway, thank you so much for those of you who pointed that out. So a guarantee period on an annuity does not mean, as I misunderstood it, that the pension is paid for 5 years after you die, whenever you died. But for some pensions, I understood that you had to die before you were 75. What it means is it will keep paying your pension if you die within that guarantee period. But say it's a 5-year guarantee and you die after 2 years, it will keep paying out for 3. So it's a little bit more complex and not as straightforward as I had anticipated. I'm sorry if I misled any of you. It was completely my misunderstanding. I did ring the pension annuity administrator guy back yesterday, and he said that yes, I had misunderstood it and that it was a common mistake. Lots of people make the same misunderstandings, so I'm not going to beat myself up too much, but I am sorry if I misled you. The other thing I asked him, which also came up in the comments, was would my annuity be back paid if it wasn't going to commence until the beginning of September? And I asked him that, and he said yes, it would. He wasn't quite sure how that would happen, whether it would be sort of added to each monthly payment or whether it would come in as an extra, well, not a lump sum, but as an extra payment in itself. So at least I'm glad to know that they will back pay that until, well, it's supposed to start on the 30th of June, so they will backdate it to the 30th of June. The other thing I asked him is when the lump sum would be paid, because I did point out that it wasn't going to take them 3 months to figure out what that amount would be. And he said it usually was paid about halfway through the processing period, and it wasn't actually paid out by them, it was paid out by the university itself, and I didn't actually realize that. So it does seem that there's quite a bit of toing and froing going on between the university and the administrators over this sort of thing, and I'm not the only employee who probably is taking retirement at the moment. So it is a little bit complex what's going on in the background, but it's encouraging to me that I will get the lump sum sooner than I thought, and that the annuity will be backdated to the 30th of June. Now, although I submitted the forms ticking that I wanted the 5-year guarantee period, and I got it wrong in my misunderstanding, I've decided to actually let that stand, because as I said in my previous video, the difference between a 5-year guarantee period and a no-year guarantee period was, I think, about £11 a year. And I think actually if something did happen to me in the next 5 years, I still don't think my adult kids are on their feet enough enough yet to be able to handle that financially. So I think to have that little bit of money coming in every month for any sort of post-mortem expenses would be quite useful. And yeah, so I've decided to leave it like that. The administrators did actually ring me back again at the end of yesterday for a formal call from their point of view, just to go over the forms and to make sure I was happy with what I'd put there. So I think they're now running the different annuities from the different annuity providers for me to choose from. I'm expecting that envelope in the post early next week, and then I've got a booked call with them on Wednesday morning to talk all that through. And then I think if I can make a decision then or very shortly afterwards, they will start getting things processed. But as I've said before, I'm of the understanding they can't actually process anything until the university has confirmed to them that my last pension contribution has been made through my end of June salary. So this is all turning into quite a complex process, but I've come to the point now where I've just accepting that it is what it is, and I'm having to roll with it. But it is good news that the lump sum will come a bit sooner, and it is good news that the annuity will be backdated, and I won't know the exact amount of the annuity until I've chosen which provider, and that won't happen until I've had this booked call next Wednesday. So that's an update on that. The other thing that I think needed a little bit of an update was, I've mentioned about one of my debit cards was under threat of being cancelled because I wasn't using it. Well, I went on to the online banking for that card yesterday, and I've ordered a new PIN. So that'll come next week. And when it does, I'll just make a quick purchase. My card will then be secured in the sense that I will get a new one when it expires in the summer, and then I'll just move some money over to cover that expense from my main account to my utilities account. And I did also look at my other debit cards. I've got one credit card, the one that I said has one payment left on it, which actually expires in September, which is when the interest-free period is over. And I was just thinking, I don't really need that credit card, but it might be useful just to make sure I've got the PIN for that in case anything happens. So I've ordered a PIN for that one as well. So now all my sort of cards and PINs are at least in process to being up to date. So I think that was just about everything on that front, except when we were mentioning tax and record keeping towards the end of the catch-up, I suddenly had an awful thought that I had got the interest amounts wrong that I'd submitted to my accountant. The thing is with interest payments that the April payment of interest on bank accounts can either come in right at the beginning of the month or a little bit later. And if it comes in at the beginning of the month before the 5th of April, it falls into the previous tax year. But if it comes in on the 6th of April or afterwards, it falls into the coming tax year. And what I had forgotten to do was add in for the last tax year, the figures that I've submitted to my accountant, the beginning of April interest payments. So I had to sit down yesterday and go through all of my bank accounts and just check the interest in my interest tracker, and I had to adjust the amount accordingly. So I've sent him an updated spreadsheet, and I know he hasn't processed it yet, but again, that's just another thing maybe to be aware of, is in April, which side of the 5th or 6th of April do various things fall, and make sure you get them in the right tax year, because I'm a prime example of not having got that right this time round. Anyway, so I suppose talking about getting the interest in the wrong tax year probably leads me to what I had intended to talk about today, which was my experience with keeping records for tax purposes. Now, I will say right now, I am not a financial advisor. I am not a tax advisor. I am just an organized person who has over the years had to keep bits of paper and more recently electronic documents in an organized manner so that they can be submitted in an organized form to an accountant who then does the tax return for me. Over the years, I have discovered that tax is such a complicated thing that I cannot really get my head around, that it is better for me to have somebody to do it for me. So I'm not going to sit here today and explain to people whether or not the income that you've got from Vinted or Etsy or anything falls into the trading allowance or not, because every single person's situation is different, and I am not going to be held accountable for misleading anybody about everything. So in that respect, I did a little bit of homework for you, and I would like to point you in the direction of a YouTube video that I came across yesterday. It's a channel called Heelan Associates, and I'm going to spell that. I'm not putting a link in my description for this video because I'm still not quite sure what the limits or regulations are about links on YouTube, and I don't want to be penalized for something that I didn't actually know I had transgressed. But they're called Heelan Associates, Heelan. And the guy on there, he is a qualified accountant, and he speaks very, very clearly about things like trading allowances, getting on top of your admin as a self-employed person. The one I watched last night was called Self-Employed - Your First £1,000 is Free, and then in brackets trading allowance. And what was so good about that video is at the end he talks about setup costs for small businesses and losses. And that was something that I didn't know about, is that you can it can be advantageous to submit a tax return so that you get tax relief on pre-set up losses. And I'm not going to say any more about it, but I would point you in their direction, because I found that incredibly clear. And at the end of that video, he had links to another video called Being Self-Employed and Employed at the Same Time, which is effectively the situation I'm in, because that again is pretty complex. And that also at the end of the video on self-employment, he had another link saying, how does self-employment tax work in the UK? So if you want to know the specifics of how things work, I would go over there. I also found a website called the Low Income Tax Reform Group, and they are at litrg.org.uk, and they had an interesting page on calculating self-employed profits from multiple trades. And basically that means if you have got several self-employed businesses or side hustles going on at the same time, you will probably need to put a page into your tax return for each one, and that was very, very useful. I had a bit of a rummage round on the Low Income Tax Reform Group website, and they've got some very helpful stuff in terms of how side hustles and tax, etc., affect benefits and things, which I really know nothing about. So that one might be worth a look. But the Low Income Tax Reform Group does say that the oracle for all of these things is the gov.uk website. And I've been through that, and I came across a very interesting calculator. If you type in to Google search, do I need to pay tax on my side hustle or something like that, and hit return, a gov.uk link will probably come up that will help you see by clicking various buttons, clicking through, as to whether you need to submit a tax return or not, whether or not you need to register as a sole trader, which is effectively register as being self-employed. And again, I am not going to say to anyone what you should or shouldn't do. That green on gov.uk was very helpful and effectively told me that yes, I do need to register as a sole trader. So I emailed my accountant on Friday. Was it Friday I emailed him? And I just queried that in the light of the earnings that YouTube say they're going to pay me at the end of this month. And I said, do I need to register as self-employed, or will you just sort this out as extra income? And he got back to me very, very quickly and said I was still registered as self-employed from when I ran my own business before, and when I was trading as a freelance proofreader and translator. So that's quite helpful, and it's another reason why I like someone to do this for me, because they're trained to know these things. I don't know these things. Looking at a self-assessment tax return form sends me into a spin. I cannot do it. So that's why I have someone to do it for me. I also found some interesting pages on gov.uk that were talking about the business records you need to keep if you're self-employed, and the expenses you can claim if you are self-employed. And those are the things really that I've had experience with over the years, is keeping records and claiming expenses. And basically, this really is very, very important. And I've had experience with this for at least 2 family members. And I cannot underline the importance really of keeping accurate records. Even if you're just throwing receipts in a box, it's better than throwing them in the bin. It really, really is. And I'm talking to myself right now, because when I was thinking about this yesterday, I thought I bought a tripod for my phone for this YouTube channel. I really ought to save that email receipt as a PDF and put it in a folder for my YouTube expenses. Well, I went back through my emails, and haven't I only just deleted that email and emptied the bin? It's nowhere to be found. So effectively, you know, apart from a line on my bank statement saying that I bought a gift card for Argos, I have got no proof of purchase for the tripod that I am currently perching my phone on. I can still claim that as an expense, but if HMRC decided to look into my accounts for some reason, I wouldn't actually be able to prove that that £10 gift card was spent on a tripod. So although at the moment for expenses in the UK you can just submit an overall figure, you still need to keep the invoices and paperwork relating to the items that make up that overall figure, just in case they are needed. And before I've even started, I've made that boo-boo, and I really should have known better. So in the past, I used to do this all in a very paper-based way. I had a big lever arch file with 12 plastic pockets in it, one for each month of the year. Then every time my ex-husband bought something that was considered an expense, back in the day you would get a till receipt or maybe a packaging slip if it was something that came through the post. And I used to spend ages, you know, rummaging through bits on the desk, making sure pockets were searched before things went in the wash to find receipts and whatever. And each month those receipts would go into the plastic pocket, and I would also make a list on a bit of A4 paper with a date of what the thing was for and how much was spent. And at the end of the month I would add that all up, and I could put a claim into the accountant for the company that he worked for, and they would reimburse that. And then at the end of the year I would have 12 monthly figures that were reimbursed expenses, and I could add those up, and those sheets and those figures used to go to our personal accountant, who would put that on the, well, it was all paper-based then, he would put it on the paper-based form. So it really, really is very, very important to keep receipts for things that you've bought for your business, And especially now that, as I've just illustrated, they come through in the email and you think, well, and I've just deleted it by accident. So what I really should have done was opened the email, right-clicked on it, pressed print, changed the print option from print to save as PDF, saved it as a PDF in my downloads folder, and then moved that into the file on my memory stick that is called expenses. And I didn't do it. So, you know, I'm a living example of an idiot at the moment, but as I said, it's only £10. I mean, it's still £10, and I will be claiming, I think it was £9.60, though the gift card was £10. You know, the tripod was £9.99, because I do know I had a penny left on the Argos card, and I was debating or not whether to save the card just because it had got a penny on it. I have actually saved it, so I've saved the penny card, but ditch the receipt, which is absolutely mental. But anyway, I shall still be claiming it, but I will not have the paperwork or the electronic document to back that up. Now, the other things that I used to be able to claim for my ex-husband's work, and also when I was freelancing, were things like stationery. So, you know, computer ink, printer ink, biros, the notebook that I've written my notes in for today, that would probably count, as long as I was using that notebook purely for making YouTube notes. Anything like that, I mean, printer paper, anything sort of stationery related. Training courses are another thing, if they pertain directly to the business that you're running. So if I go on a training course to learn how to edit, I need to keep the paperwork and booking slips for that, because that technically would count as an expense. And then there are other things that are considered expenses, but they're proportionate, in the sense that the phone that I am using to film this video is actually my personal phone, but I am using it technically at the moment for business purposes. So what I need to do is make sure I am keeping my phone bills, my mobile phone bills for this phone every month. And I haven't got those either, but I know I can log on to the provider's website and get PDFs of those, and that's actually going to go onto my to-do list. And then I can submit those amounts to my accountant at the end of next year and say to him, well, what do you think is a reasonable proportion that we can claim in respect to me trading as a creator on YouTube? And he will make that decision for me. But in the past, I have tended to go with 50%, and it's not being queried as yet. And I would say at the moment that I use my phone mainly for social media creation. So, you know, we may be able to agree that it's more than 50%. And again, with internet usage, what I'm doing today would not be possible without an internet connection. And although that's the house internet, you know, my personal internet connection that I am paying for, again, a proportion of that could be claimed as business expenses. And again, also, if I'm sitting in a room in my own house with heating and lighting, a proportion of that technically can be claimed. And that is why I have an accountant, because I don't want to be making the wrong guesses. I tell him the overall figures, and then he puts in what he thinks is reasonable in his professional opinion. So it's not just things that you buy or services that you purchase that you need to keep a record of, but you also need to keep a record of what comes in. So on a spreadsheet or in your notebook, you don't just need to have a page or several pages of listing what's gone out, but you also need to list what has come in each month. And it was actually thinking about what YouTube partnership program had said they are going to pay me at the end of June that prompted this concern, because I realized that if they multiplied that payment for the end of June by 12, I was going to be well over the £1,000 trading allowance for the current tax year. And that is why I technically needed to find out if I was still registered as self-employed. So I need to keep I need to keep a record of what YouTube pay me every month. And that's also why I mentioned Vinted in my last video, because I would rather be safe than sorry. Although I was selling my own items on Vinted and that amount came in at under £1,000, but if I use the trading allowance, it might not be beneficial for me in terms of the expenses that I need to claim. And in that respect, the money I have coming in from Vinted will actually be, I think, classed as a separate income stream, and I need to record it. But if I was doing nothing else other than just having an employed job and I wasn't doing YouTube and I'd sold £277 of stuff on Vinted, I don't think there would be anything to worry about. But because I have Vinted and I have YouTube, I think there is cause for concern. So these days, in the days of digital storage rather than paper-based systems, I think what I'm going to probably be doing is setting up another tab on my finance spreadsheet, one for YouTube income and then another tab for expenses. And what you can do with spreadsheets, especially in Google Drive, is if you list the item in one cell and you've got a document in another file, you can actually link the document to that cell. So I could have a line saying July 2025 that I bought a better laptop, or I bought a better selfie stick and tripod, and I could actually link that word selfie stick, and by clicking on the link, that would take me through to the actual documents that indicated the purchase was made, when it was made, and how much it was. So in some ways, electronic filing of documents is a lot more efficient and tidy than the old paper-based system used to be. I mean, I had a massive filing cabinet back in the day, and I am so glad that I do not have that in my house anymore. But having said that, I do think where possible, it is really, really good to have paper backups of things, because I don't personally trust the internet 100%. If my bank or provider of any kind won't give me a paper statement, I do press right click, print, save as PDF. And I'm going to have to find somewhere locally where I can go and get these things printed. My second son, my second son was here this week, and he's moving accommodation soon and has a printer that he wants to get rid of, and he was very happy to hear that I would be willing to take that off him. So it may be that I might actually be able to print my own backups at some point in the near future. So anyway, I'm not sure this has been quite the comprehensive tax and record keeping video that you might have expected, but my main take-home message is, please write everything down, keep your bits of paper, keep your electronic documents. And the other thing, I think the thing that really prompted me in the catch-up to saying I wanted to talk about this, was the whole business of tax on account. I don't know if those of you who are maybe starting up in self-employment have heard of tax on account, and I certainly hadn't until we tripped over it and fell flat on our faces. Effectively, once you get to a point where your side hustle or your self-employment is bringing in enough money to be paying tax to HMRC every year, they don't just want the tax for the tax year that has finished. They want half of that again as payment on account for the year that is coming. So say you owed them £2,000 for the tax year, whichever tax year it was, and you thought, oh, that's great, I've got £2,000 in my account, I've put that aside for HMRC, I'll be fine. And then they send you a bill, and it's not a bill for £2,000, it's actually a bill for £3,000, because they base the tax you are going to pay in the coming year on what you have paid in the previous year. And so they want half of it up front. So because you paid £2,000 last year, they want £1,000 for next year in advance, and you have to pay £3,000. Now, I have actually heard secondhand of people losing their homes over making this error. So when you go self-employed, and I think the guy on the Heelan Associates YouTube channel was saying this as well, make sure you don't just put aside 20% for tax, but put aside at least 25 to 30, because you do not know when you are going to cross that threshold and need to pay tax on account. And if you don't need to pay tax on account, then effectively you've built yourself up a little buffer, because maybe you're going to need to do it the next year. And I've fallen foul of this myself, because I did, I think, 2 or 3 freelancing contracts one year, and it sort of flagged up with HMRC that I might be sort of developing a freelancing as an alternative career, and they wanted tax on account that year. And it was only because I had an accountant who could ring them up on his HMRC hotline and talk them down and say, no, she hasn't got any contracts for next year, this was a one-off, she's just going to make a one-off payment. If I hadn't had that facility, then I too would have been stung for tax on account. You can get in touch with them with a form and claim it back, but honestly, who wants that bother if you don't have to pay it in the first place? So I would just be aware of that. The trading allowance is one thing to be aware of. Go and look it up, find out for yourself. There is also tax on account is something you need to be aware of. Go and look that up and find out for yourself. As I said before, the gov.uk website is helpful, and that YouTube channel, Heelan Associates, really helps interpret that in a very clear way, and I found that helpful, and I will be listening to a lot more from him. I also found a website for a charity called TaxAid, which is taxaid.org.uk, which exists to help people who cannot afford an accountant with tax problems. I know nothing about them, but I just thought I'd throw that in there in case anybody needed to reach out to someone for some help, because as I said, I am not a tax advisor, I am not a qualified accountant, I am not a financial advisor, I'm just someone who's had a little bit of experience and sometimes fallen flat on their face to gain that experience. Anyway, so I hope that's been helpful. I'm not sure it really has, and it's probably, well, it really is only pertinent to people who live in the UK, but these thoughts were prompted by the fact that the YouTube Partnership Programme had said they were going to pay me such a sizable amount at the end of this month. And I did do a little bit of maths, and I think that if YouTube were going to pay somebody more than about £80 a month, then you probably would be in the frame for needing to check whether you needed to register as a sole trader. But I'm just saying, check. Please don't take my word for it. Go on gov.uk and use their checker, and it will tell you whether or not you need to do that. Anyway, I feel a bit hesitant about this video because, you know, I don't want anyone to say, oh, well, she said. But so that's why I'm saying go away and find out from yourself from the horse's mouth. Don't just, you know, say, oh, well, she said, because as you can see from my last video, I was wrong about those annuities. There may be some nuances for things that I've said in this video that, again, may be wrong. But I know what isn't wrong, and what isn't wrong is keeping adequate records of things that are coming in and of things that are coming out, and that it is our personal responsibilities to know whether or not we owe HMRC some tax. There's no point sitting there waiting for them to ask you. It is our responsibilities as individuals to do that. Anyway, so that's it for today. It's almost like a catch-up on a catch-up. I really don't know where we're going to go with videos next week. I'm just going to let the weekend unfold, and we will see. But anyway, thank you for dropping by, and as you can see, my retirement preparation journey is taking turns that I hadn't expected. I really hadn't expected to find myself setting up a small business, to be honest with you, but it looks like that's where it's going to have to go. Anyway, enjoy what's left of the weekend, and I will see you on, oh my goodness, Monday. It does come round very quickly, doesn't it? Well, thanks for dropping by, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye now.